Now we're in the interior of the module. This particular vehicle is a Demers MX170 on a GM G4500. So this is a Type 3 MX170. But many of the things we'll talk about in the back of this vehicle carry through to the Type 1 170 module as well. We're going to point out some things like standard and optional items. We're also going to talk about the HVAC system, the separate heat and cooling ventilation. The very first thing and the most important thing I want to talk about is the interior cabinet wall and how we construct that and how we test it. This is one of the core DNA items of Demers ambulances. It goes with our safety principle and how we build it to keep you safe in the interior. This cabinet wall is one piece, as you can see, down the entire length of the vehicle, down both walls and the floor. The cabinet wall is made out of extruded aluminum. It's assembled. The cabinet backs are mounted to that wall outside of the vehicle. Then we bring it in, set it on the structure itself, and bolt it down. The reason we do that is so it can pass a pull test, which is up to 11,000 pounds depending on the model of the ambulance. This particular vehicle is an 11,000 pound pull test. As I raise it, you'll see the size of the extrusions of the flip-up cabinetry. It also highlights this seamless extruded wall. These pieces fit together perfectly, giving it a nice clean look, and it gives it the structural strength that we need to do that horizontal pull test. Once those straps are attached, hydraulic pull is applied to the wall, giving it that 11,000 pound test. As you can see, when I pull, it actually moves the entire vehicle. So this wall is a separate structure inside the module that's already passed all the AMD testing. When you think about ambulance accidents, there's two types that could greatly affect occupant safety on the street side of the module. First and foremost would be a side impact collision over the wheels or anywhere on that street side of the module. Second would be a shear, where a vehicle comes across and possibly shears part of the wall of the module, which has caused some catastrophic damage in vehicles in the past, as you've seen online and in all the ambulance studies. With this extruded wall bolted together and mounted in, having that pull test, if you take a side impact or a shear impact, the cabinetry itself is not attached to the wall. So consider for a moment that you're sitting in the airway seat or the attendant seat. The vehicle takes a side impact. Whether a manufacturer builds out of aluminum or plywood, most of those cabinets are mounted to the wall. So when the wall takes the force, there's a possibility that a cabinet could detach. In a Demers, that is not the case. Even if the structure is affected of the actual module, it comes in, absorbs the energy, the cabinet wall remains in place, as we've talked about the pull test on this wall, and it protects the occupant from the cabinet detaching, coming off there, and hurting the patient or the occupant. You can see on the flip-up design of the doors that we use the same style extrusion as the wall is built out of. It's extruded but cut to seamlessly fit together, and then it's bolted in with about a 1-inch machine bolt that keeps this restocking feature sturdy in place, and it gives you a lot of structural support. I would challenge you to look at some of the other manufacturers, grab a hold of one of their restocking cabinets and give it a pull like this. You can see the structure barely moves. It's got a good solid close to it. It's got a latching mechanism that keeps it in place. And in addition, we use the DOT-rated Lexan as a standard on all the Demers modulars. Now we're going to discuss the HVAC system, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems of the Demers. In all of our modular units, we use a very similar layout. We never use a combination unit that discharges heat and AC on the bulkhead like the other traditional manufacturers do. The reason we don't do that is because if you have a combo system that's producing heat and air conditioning, the effects of each of them are probably decreased by the function of being able to do both. For instance, if you have the air conditioning condenser up there and you have the antifreeze flowing through for the heat, you've already got a heat source in that air conditioning compartment that doesn't allow the cooling to be as effective. So what we do at Demers is We use a separate heater that's underneath this CPR seat, we'll show you in a second, and a separate AC unit which is mounted behind this wall. It's easy to access by taking this header pad off. You can actually stand in the walkthrough, look up in there. You could functionally work on an air conditioning system or replace any components, service it, and troubleshoot it or diagnose it. The discharge for the air conditioning system is a ducted system with all separate vents. The first is a fresh air intake, and each additional vent discharges air conditioning. So if I switch on the air conditioning system, it's going to discharge with an equal amount of pressure and temperature. It's going to come across the ceiling of the module and cool from the top down like it should. When we switch over to the heating system, this is a completely unique system to Demers. I'm going to kick on the fan for a second so you might hear the background noise. But what I want to display is that the heat is actually discharged the entire length of the wall underneath. There's a lip here. The actual heating system, which is a standard auxiliary heater, has the antifreeze coming in and a blower motor with a discharge cage. There's a structure inside here that's mounted behind the entire wall. And what that structure does is the fan blows the heated air into this box. The box goes the entire length of the module, and you get a nice even heat that rolls out underneath the wall. It heats from the floor up. So when your patient is on the cot and the cot is cool, it starts to warm up. The heat rises as it should. What the attendants, the paramedics and the EMTs tell us is they love that system because they get in from outside, they have a coat on, they've been working and lifting, they're sweating, the patient is cold, and the traditional systems will blow heat right onto them while they're trying to work, and they get overheated while the patient is cold. With this system, you get the air coming out underneath, warms the patient first. You even get a little bit of radiant heat, of course not too hot to touch, but you do get some radiant heat from this panel all the way down, so the patient feels the warmth next to them and they feel the heat coming from underneath them, while the paramedics and EMTs and firefighters are able to do their work without starting to sweat to death. So in a review or summary of the system, separate AC, separate heat, each does its job independently, and each functions much more efficiently. Now we're in the action area of the Demers MX170. We're going to talk about a few special features, a few optional features, and also our standards. When we did the outside discussion, we talked about that every Demers is multiplexed. The beauty of multiplex is you can get the signals for the system in a variety of ways: low voltage, high voltage, magnetic switches, rockers, almost any type of input that you would want is available. On this particular vehicle, the multiplex system is outside. This is your touchpad that controls temperature, fan speed. You'll see this number flickering here. It is actually displaying the current oxygen pressure. On this pad, we have a temperature setting. Set that. We can set our fan speed on automatic, which is the best way, in my opinion, to do it. If you set the fan on auto and pick your temperature, it will adjust itself to come to the temperature that you want without fiddling with it. Here we have the checkout timer. We'll cycle through 5, 10, 15 minutes. Auxiliary 1 shows your oxygen pressure, which is 0. 16 now, there we go. So Auxiliary 1 shows your oxygen pressure, which is atmospheric pressure of 16. Auxiliary 2 is not used in this particular layout, but it's there as an available feature. Intercode alarms for patient condition red, patient condition yellow, patient condition green, and those do ring at the front of the vehicle with an audible alarm. This is the volume rheostat for the stereo. If you've selected inverter, our inverter is a combination battery charger and inverter. It's a Xantrex Freedom HF. It's 1,000 watt as our normal. If we were plugged into a Shoreline, you're going to get several indications. First would be bulk charge, which means your batteries are lower and it's giving it a rapid charge. Second would be an absorption mode, ABS, which means the batteries are nearly topped off and the charger will go into a trickle cycle. And the third will be FUL for full, which means your batteries are topped off, you're plugged in the bay, and you're ready to go. If you want to turn on your 110 outlets while you're out on the streets, just hold the green button down. You're going to get an immediate indication that you have 14.5 input voltage, and our green light lit up on our 12 volt system, or I'm sorry, on our 110 volt system, so we know we immediately have module power. As a side note, when you're plugged in at the station, outside above all of our Shoreline indicators, you do have a green light to show that the vehicle is plugged in, receiving 110 current, and charging. What I like about this side panel, when the attendants come in the morning to check their vehicle, they open that side door. They immediately get their oxygen pressure. They can see if the vehicle is charging or if there's any fault codes or errors here, and they get all the information they need. And now we're going to go into our oxygen system. Electronic oxygen is not new to the industry, but the way Demers does it is a little bit different. And as a paramedic, I find it to be a very useful feature. You'll notice there's no oxygen switch here. It's because the system is designed to leave your tank on so it can always check your pressure. And when you turn the ignition solenoid on, it automatically opens the oxygen tank solenoid past the sensor. So in plain English, you've got your tank on, you've got, let's say, 2,000 pounds of pressure, which would be displayed here. Excuse me. As soon as you turn the ignition on, it opens the valve and it flows to the outlets. If your flow meters are plugged in here and turned on, you have an immediate flow of oxygen. So when the attendants get in the vehicle with a patient, they need to get them hooked up to the oxygen quickly. All they have to do is reach over, turn on that flow meter, they get an immediate flow of oxygen. Should anything happen to the electronic valve, as with any mechanical item, you could have a failure. So you get the standard emergency bypass valve. If for some reason your electronic system fails, you just turn that valve. That's where the electronic solenoid is, and this bypasses that solenoid to give you flow. These are the Demers Premium countertops. They are a Corian-like material. They're a solid surface, not permeable to any fluids. You can see there's a nice lip around this area for a work surface so your items don't roll off of there. We also have that available in the cardiac monitor area, or the second action area, as some people call that. This is the exclusive Demers mobility track system. This particular vehicle is set up to handle a second attendant in a safety seat. It does not have the second backboarding position, which we'll go over in a different video, but I want to highlight the features of this particular mobility track setup. Here we have the cardiac monitor tray. It will easily extend away from the wall to give the attendant some places to work. And then in transport mode, the attendant may be sitting here facing the patient, working, able to see the monitor and the patient at the same time. You see the cardiac rhythm that's coinciding with the actual patient. Easy to move. We'll go over all the movements later, but just for display purposes, I can slide forward. I can adjust my cardiac monitor tray, put it in whatever position I want to have. With the mobility package, you get a set of controls just like you had on the action wall, so the attendant does not have to get up to control the lighting, the temperature, the intercode, the dome light here, or the exhaust fan. There's also an option to have a second complete suction system on this side wall. We would put a suction outlet here, a canister, and a separate switch. You have 110 and 12 volt access to anything you might need to plug in, like your monitor, so it can sit on that tray. It's bolted down, it's strapped, it's pull tested, and it's charging at the same time. The head cabinet of the mobility system has a pop-out laptop or writing tray, or a lot of times people just use it as a second work surface, lay their IV supplies on while they're starting their IV. As you can see, I can even go 45 degrees. I can come up with my seat a little bit and lock in at 45. Easy access to my patient. I have a little bit of work area here. I can go back to an extended position for transport. I have two drawers that slide out, solid aluminum drawers. We have the ability to put IV supplies or whatever else you might need in there. I'm at a 45-degree angle in the mobility seat. Of course, if we're an attendant, we're going to be seat belted into a 3-point seat belt. EVS does offer 3, 4, or 5-point seat belts. I'm going to leave this off because it's going to scratch at the microphone, but you get the idea. Our attendant is safely seated at a 45-degree angle. There are 3 different controls on the seat. It takes maybe a shift or 2 to get used to, but once you get used to it, you'll be able to glide around back and forth and access all parts of the patient, and I'm going to display that for you. So we have a lever on the left side which controls the sliding, the actual mobility track. There are multiple lock-in locations. If you are between lock-in locations and there's some sort of a collision or movement, the seat's going to lock in and stop itself. But as you can see, the attendant can slide down toward the foot of the patient. You can go back and forth toward the wall. Of course, I'm out so I can show the rotating feature. But here, if I'm working on the patient, I can access the limb leads, the extremities, anything I need to get there. When I'm in an action type environment where I'm doing quite a bit of work, I may want to be locked at 90, or I may want to be locked at 45 degrees, and then I still have the ability to slide forward and back again to reach all parts of the patient. When we go into transport mode, it's rather simple. Come forward so you don't hit the wall, rotate and turn at the same time, and you can lock in. Someone as tall as me, I'm a little bit over 6'2". You can see I can actually even stretch out here if I choose to, and I have access to that laptop tray or the work area. People that may not be as tall as me, you can get as close to the monitor and the drawers as you need, but you can see you're not limited. We can set this up however suits your needs, but easy to access the equipment you might need. So with the Demers mobility track system compared to a traditional squad bench, which we do both of, the mobility track is much safer. Your attendant is forward facing. They have constant eye contact with the patient. They're able to see their cardiac monitor even if it's over to the side. They have that ability to move around while remaining seated. They can reach every part of the person, and we can get your supplies that are needed for that critical care into this area. Of course, not every transport, not every time will you be able to stay seated, but that's our goal here at Demers, is to keep the attendants sitting down, forward facing, and to keep them safe. Go home after the shift. We're thinking about inside the box here. We're talking about ergonomics, we're talking about safety, we're talking about pull testing. Those are all core to the DNA. Those are all core to the Demers brand, and we believe in it wholeheartedly, and we think when you see one, you will too.